Madam Clerk. Before we consider items on today's agenda, are there board members who wish to declare any conflicts of interest? Seeing none, let's proceed with the agenda. Minutes of the February 7th, 2019 Board of Regents meeting have been provided. May I have a motion to approve these minutes? Moved and seconded. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes, and thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just a few introductions and announcements this morning. First, know that I'm very pleased to share one of our colleagues is in the news. Regent Mark Tyler was recently presented with an award from the Wisconsin Child Care Administrators Association for his work supporting early childhood and families. Well done, Mark. Let's give Mark a round of applause. I'd also like to remind the Regents that the UW Systems Research in the Rotunda event is coming up again this year. It's in its 16th year, and it'll be held on April 17th in the Rotunda. Know that this is a great opportunity where our students and their faculty advisors show and demonstrate the outcomes of their research. It's also a great opportunity to do some legislative visits in the Capitol. So I'm hopeful that you can join President Cross and myself in attending what I think is one of our year's greatest events. President Cross, I believe you have some introductions as well.
Thank you, Regent President Bailing. Good morning, everyone. The general theme of our meeting today is student success. Our efforts to support student success must span a broad range of strategies to accommodate the different needs of each student. Later this morning, we'll take a closer look at one key element of student success, and that is the changing world of advising, student support, and student engagement. Financial aid is also a vital part of the student success picture. Last night I had the opportunity to take part in the celebration of the 10th anniversary of the Fund for Wisconsin Scholars. This private, not-for-profit charitable foundation was endowed with a gift of $175 million from Tasha and John Mortridge. As of this year, the fund has provided $83 million in scholarships to nearly, get this now, 20,000 students. That's amazing. The Mortridge's investment in Wisconsin is helping to make a UW system education more affordable, more accessible, impacting students in all 72 Wisconsin counties and at all UW system institutions. Investing in our future like this can change lives for generations, and I'm personally grateful to the Mortridges for their exceptional generosity. Ensuring the transfer process goes smoothly is another key factor in student success, and this was one of our priorities in restructuring. However, transfer rates for students from two-year campuses continues to decline. For a brief update on our transfer efforts and the work we're doing to improve those, I will call upon Interim Vice President for Academic and Student Affairs, Karen Schmidt. Karen?
Good morning.
Thank you, President Cross and Regent President Bailing. Today I'm pleased to present the board with a brief update on the Office of Academic and Student Affairs work on reviewing and revising system policies in support of the restructuring of UW colleges and UW Extension. Since June, the Office's Academic and Student Affairs Policy Committee has been actively reviewing the relevant state, region, and system administration policies to identify those that require technical and substantive revision to support restructuring. To date, I'm pleased to report that the committee has worked effectively and efficiently to undertake reviews, recommend revisions, and implement necessary changes. For today's report, I'd like to update you on two examples that directly support the goals of restructuring as they relate to transfer and to statewide outreach. In the next slide, I don't know if we have the slides up, but the first example is the integration of the UW College's Guaranteed Transfer Program into System Administration Policy 135. This policy guides UW undergraduate student transfer. Regent Resolution 10-956 set clear expectations that the receiving institutions were responsible for maintaining the transfer mission of the branch campuses. transfer was a core component of the UW College's mission, and one of the primary objectives of restructuring was to maintain the transfer mission on branch campuses and to reduce barriers for students transferring within and between all UW institutions. Given the importance of transfer to branch campus students, one of the earliest and most frequent questions we received after restructuring is, will the UW College's guaranteed transfer program be continued? I know this because I received it from my own nephew as he entered UW Colleges at now the Wausau campus. In response to student, parent, faculty, and branch campus student concerns, an early decision of the restructuring was that the receiving institutions would maintain all of the UW College's transfer programs and agreements during the Phase 1 year. That was from July 1st, 2018 to July 2019. To ensure continuity of this decision after Phase 1, my office charged the restructuring work group to review and recommend how to continue the program for the branch campus students. The work group recommended that the best way to maintain the benefits of the program across multiple receiving institutions was to integrate this program into System Administration Policy 135, where the principles, guidelines, and administrative practices are established for all institutions to follow to support and facilitate undergraduate transfer. The one modification that the work group recommended was the change in the title of the program from UW College's Guaranteed Transfer Program to the UW System Guaranteed Transfer Admission Program. In August 2018, the work group's recommendations were presented to the UW's Restructuring Steering Committee, and they were discussed and endorsed as an effective system approach to ensuring benefits of guaranteed transfer for all branch campus students after July 1st, 2019. In September, I referred the working group's recommendation to the Academic and Student Affairs Policy Committee, which drafted the revised policy as a technical modification and posted it for system-wide comment. And after review, the policy was approved by President Cross and is now posted on the UW System Policy website. The importance of this policy cannot be understated, and its design is expressly intended to help support student success in transfer across all institutions of the UW system. The Office of Academic and Student Affairs is now in the process of developing guidelines, procedures, and assessment plans for the ongoing program continuation at the branch campuses. Successful implementation of the Guaranteed Transfer Admission Program will ensure that the benefits of the transfer degree programs that are offered at the branch campuses will continue to support student success in transfer between all UW institutions. I'll now turn to a brief update about the ongoing progress being made in the review and revision of policies related to the statewide outreach mission of UW Extension. Regent Resolutions 10-956 and 61 set the expectation that the UW Extension's statewide outreach mission and service responsibilities were transferred with the 4 divisions to their receiving units at UW Madison and UW System Administration. In October, the Office of Academic and Student Affairs formed a policy working group to review and make recommendations for the revision of statutory, regent, and system administration policies in this regard. To date, the technical modifications to the system policies have been completed, and at the December board meeting, Regent Policies 18.1 and 2 on the organization of extension and outreach activity were removed by Resolution 11-133 because they were obsolete as a result of restructuring. So presently, the work group is coordinating with the board office as well as the Academic and Student Affairs Committee to develop and implement recommendations for substantive changes to replace Regent Policy 18.1, revised System Administration Policies 125 through 130, and these will provide the guidelines, coordination, and administrative practices for UW Madison and for UW System Administration in continuing their respective state outreach missions. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. I want to point out a couple of things in her report. And we didn't have the slides, but one of the key elements in this restructuring that we wanted to maintain and not improve, hopefully improve, and that's the use of the guaranteed transfer admission process. I think there's some misunderstanding on the part of some communities and students that the campuses that were joined with the four-year campuses were the only options those students had. And this is an effort to make sure everyone understands that this guarantee transfer admissions policy that has been adopted guarantees that transfer throughout the system, including Madison. There are obviously different conditions for different campuses, but that's incredibly important. These are transfer institutions, and that transfer rate should go up, not down. Thanks, Karen. Continuing with my report, I would like to remind people that the Wisconsin Dairy Task Force 2.0 will be meeting at 10 a.m. on Friday, March the 15th at UW Green Bay's Sheboygan campus. The Dairy Task Force 2.0 was created in 2018 and is a joint effort between the Department of Agriculture, Trade, and Consumer Protection and the University of Wisconsin system. The objective of the Dairy Task Force 2.0 is to right the ship of one of Wisconsin's most important industries. Obviously, this is particularly important to Regent Peterson. We see your struggles, and your UW is all in, and you'll hear more about that phrase in a moment, to help address the challenges. The dairy industry came up in my recent discussions with Governor Evers, and I appreciate his continuing support for the work of this task force. For the past several months, the 31 members have been working to draft a series of recommendations which will be discussed and voted on at the meeting in Sheboygan. Well, earlier this week, UW Stout Chancellor Bob Meyer announced that he'll be stepping down as of August 18th. Bob could not be here today. He had another commitment, and I, of course, chastised him for that, but nevertheless, he couldn't be here today. But I would like to say a few words about his service. Bob has spent almost 4 decades in higher education, including 32 years at Stout, another 6 years at Wisconsin, or at Indian Head, the technical college. He served as a faculty member at Stout, a college dean, special assistant to the chancellor, and finally as chancellor. Bob has been a thoughtful, dedicated leader, and it has been our privilege to work with Bob. We will be naming an interim chancellor, probably next week, to lead the campus in 2019-20 while we conduct a search for his successor. This week, the UW system is launching our All in Wisconsin campaign. The goal is to tell the UW system story, which really means telling the story of all of our institutions, our students, and our faculty and staff, as well as our close ties with the people of Wisconsin. Especially as we continue to advocate for the state to invest in us, I think we need to be bolder in sharing these stories, to remind people of the tremendous positive impact we offer in return for that investment. To kick off our All in Wisconsin campaign, we've prepared a brief video, so if you'll please turn your attention to the big screen.
For generations, the University of Wisconsin has stood alongside the people of Wisconsin, listening and learning, advancing knowledge, and striving to make lives better. Today, the University of Wisconsin system touches communities in every corner of the state, preparing graduates to thrive in a world of dynamic change and boundless opportunity, taking on the toughest challenges and turning bold ideas into real-world solutions, celebrating human creativity, from medical breakthroughs to art that moves the spirit. Creative scholarship, groundbreaking research, entrepreneurial know-how, changing countless lives one at a time, making a difference in our state, the nation, and the world, expanding the horizons of what's possible, drawing on our heritage and building for the future. It's all in Wisconsin. The University of Wisconsin system.
Well, in the coming months, you'll be seeing stories with the hashtag #AllInWisconsin on social media as well as on our website and elsewhere. So we invite you, in fact, we encourage you to look, listen, and especially share this through your social media. A significant focus of this campaign is expanding our reach. So your engagement is critical as we strive to better communicate the benefits and value of the UW system. Next, we have the faculty spotlight for the benefit of newer regents. This is a semi-regular feature at board meetings. We don't do it all the time. I wish we could do it all the time. We do it along with student spotlight, which tends to be more regular. We invest this time because we think it's important to help the public better understand what our educators do, what their workload includes. We haven't always communicated that as well as we should have. And to carry on the All in Wisconsin theme, we have a great story to tell. I think we can all be proud, very proud, of the work done by our faculty, academic staff, and others, both in the classroom and outside the classroom. As you've been hearing, the broad theme for our meeting today is student success. Many factors go into that. Perhaps none is more significant than our outstanding, caring faculty. They are a major part of why the UW system has a long-standing reputation as one of the finest systems of public education in the country and even around the world. So today I'm pleased to welcome a member of the UW-Madison faculty who is literally changing lives, both on campus and around the globe. Dr. Robert Dempsey. Here to introduce our featured guest is someone who knows him much better than I, Dean Robert Golden. Bob?
Good morning. Good morning. I want to thank the Board of Regents for this opportunity to showcase one of our truly remarkable faculty leaders. I especially want to thank Regent Miller, who encouraged us to share with you a glimpse of the incredible contributions of Dr. Dempsey following a presentation she heard as a member of the UW Hospital and Clinics Authority Board. Thank you, Regina. It is indeed both a professional as well as a personal pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Robert Dempsey, who is the Menasher Javid Professor and Chair of our Department of Neurological Surgery. Dr. Dempsey's story is inspiring, and I know that the very best chapters have yet to be written. He started life in a tough neighborhood in Chicago, and he and his siblings were the first generation in that family to attend college. Bob excelled at Notre Dame, where he graduated among the top of his class, summa cum laude, with induction into Phi Beta Kappa, and was a star on the track team. After receiving his MD degree from the University of Chicago, he completed a surgical internship and neurosurgery residency at the University of Michigan. His faculty career was launched at the University of Kentucky, where he had a meteoric rise, becoming a full professor and director of the Center of Excellence in Stroke prior to his recruitment here in 1995 as chair of our Department of Neurological Surgery. Now, in academic medicine, we refer to the proverbial triple threat superstar, an outstanding clinician who also excels in teaching and research. I've begun to worry that the triple threat might become an endangered species, as each of these missions is increasingly competitive, demanding complete and total commitment. Bob is not only a paragon of this ideal, but in fact is a quadruple threat. On top of everything else, he is a gifted and dedicated administrative leader. Dr. Dempsey cares for patients with serious, life-threatening brain diseases, such as stroke and brain cancer. This is an area that requires one to be all in. I didn't realize that there was an all in that was going to be discussed today. But this is truly all in. It is the polar opposite of a predictable, scheduled existence. Here's a trick question for the board. How does a neurosurgeon describe a 70-hour work week? The answer, partial vacation. The hours are grueling, stressful, and intense. Through all of this, Bob is precisely the kind of physician I would want to have care for me or my family. And at the same time, he leads a very active research program, currently has 5 active peer-reviewed grants from the NIH, the VA, and several foundations. But in many ways, his most important contribution to the university and to our state is as a teacher. Bob is highly sought after as an educator and mentor. Learners from the full continuum of students, residents, fellows, and junior faculty flock to him. I've lost track of the number of teaching awards that I have given him. And I think his love for teaching, whether it's teaching patients and their families or teaching our learners, is what forms the foundation for his outstanding leadership as department chair. He has developed truly outstanding people and programs, recruiting the best talent from the very top institutions, and then nurturing their development like a proud, protective, and demanding mother hen. Since his arrival, our Department of Neurologic Surgery has become widely recognized as one of the very best, I would argue the very best, in our country. Now, here's where Dr. Dempsey moves from exceptional to unique. He has taken the Wisconsin idea global. Every year, he completes medical missions to underdeveloped nations in Central and South America and Africa. He trains the local clinical workforce in the fundamentals of clinical neuroscience and emergency care, and also trains physicians from each region in the basics of neurosurgery. Now, all of this, mind you, in his spare time. In recognition of the above, Bob has received enough national and international awards to fill more than 3 single-space pages on his CV. I randomly picked a year from early in his career at Kentucky, 1994, and I noticed something striking. He received both a Master Teacher Award from the university and the St. Joseph the Worker Award from the Catholic Christian Brothers, showing you the breadth and depth of his dedication. More recently, I picked 2017, he was a visiting professor at academic medical centers in Toronto, Ohio, Illinois, 2 in New York City, the Medical College of Wisconsin, and along the way, he also received the Medical Alumni Distinguished Service Award from his alma mater, the University of Chicago. Also that year, he published 10 of his more than 250 peer-reviewed scientific papers. He has served as president of the Society of Neurologic Surgeons and in leadership positions for multiple national and international academic and clinical organizations. Wow. Now, while Bob is truly exceptional, there are aspects of his service, including some challenges and frustrations, which are not rare in academic medicine. While many new or newer faculty do not attempt to excel in all 3 of our missions, most focus on 2, and all experience the intertwining and potential synergies among the 3 to varying degrees. This means keeping up with the rapid pace of clinical innovations and constantly honing one's clinical skills, while simultaneously trying to keep abreast of the latest developments in highly competitive scientific fields or in the dramatic innovations that are occurring in the way we teach medical students. Usually, it is impossible to separate the strands of this beautiful multicolored fabric we call academic medicine. When Dr. Dempsey comes in, for example, as he often does on a Sunday, to care for a patient suffering from an acute life-threatening bleed in their brain, his team includes medical students, neurosurgery students, and perhaps a fellow. As he operates in the surgical suite, he is simultaneously teaching his learners, as well as the OR nurses, the anesthesiology resident, and maybe a junior faculty member. After he meets with the patient's family at the conclusion of the operation to explain to them the outcomes and future treatment plans, he will step into an empty conference room to talk with his team of learners about the patient's prognosis, risk factors for recurrence, and ways to mitigate those risk factors for post-operative complications. Before heading home, he will probably swing by his lab to see how his research fellow's project is progressing, as Bob mentors the study of brain ischemia, vascular cognitive decline, and the repair of injured brain tissue. So how do we categorize the 14 hours that he spent on that Sunday? When those who oversee our school and university's teaching activities ask us to measure Professor Dempsey's teaching contributions, the metrics, which were designed largely with conventional undergraduate courses in mind, failed to capture his effort. In our MD curriculum, students now spend only the first 1.5 years in didactic coursework, most of it in small group, very active learning. 2.5 years are spent learning under the direct, intense supervision of actively practicing physician educators like Bob Dempsey. Quantifying medical school faculty effort in medical student teaching via the measurement of course credits and class size is like trying to measure the horsepower of a race car by weighing it. It's the wrong tool for the job, and it produces meaningless data. As you will now see in the video, Dr. Dempsey is a remarkable physician, a remarkable teacher, and a remarkable person, gentle yet very strong. I am honored to be his colleague and friend, and our university and university system are blessed to have him on our faculty, representing the very best ideals of the Wisconsin idea. Thank you.
I'm Robert Dempsey. I chair the Department of Neurosurgery here at the University of Wisconsin. After several years of being a doctor, I realized that the Latin word for doctor, doctore, is teacher. That's what doctor means. And I realized that I could touch a few thousand patients, but my students could touch hundreds of thousands. And that was the day I became a teacher of doctors. So I very much wanted to practice medicine where I could teach. I came to Wisconsin for that very reason, to teach and influence the way teaching took place. And I don't think that's memorization. I don't think that's big lectures. I think that's influencing people one at a time, small groups, so they will influence people. So which is more devastating?
The aneurysm.
Okay. Teaching can occur everywhere in a doctor's life. I have opportunity to teach on morning rounds. I have opportunity to teach in the clinic. I have opportunity to teach at the patient bedside. I have opportunity to teach in the preparation for the operating room. The surgery itself might take quite a long time. Some of our craniotomies can take the entire day. During that time, teaching is ongoing. Sometimes I'm speaking about what I'm doing, but sometimes they're watching and seeing with our video monitors. Whereas on a clinic day, I'll be teaching about a broad range of topics, because this patient has this problem, this patient has that. And in each case, I'll be able to say, remember those lectures you took for basic science? This is where they're important. This is why you took it. This is where that applies. So rounds can be an opportunity for me to make sense of the first 2 years of medical school. I'm a neurosurgeon. I chair neurosurgery. I train neurosurgeons. But the vast majority, 98% of the students I work with do not go into neurosurgery. So when I meet a student, I say, what do you want to learn? And they might say they want to learn about brain tumors. Fine, I'll teach you that. But then I say, but I'm going to teach you how to be a doctor, how to talk to people, how to be careful, how to apply what you've learned. Because that'll be important no matter what you go into. And I want you to embrace any area of medicine you choose and make it as special for you as neurosurgery is for me. And they teach me. I mean, their computer skills, the way they think about things changes us. Students have always worked hard, medical students. They've always been very dedicated. Modern students are every bit as bright. They have more tools for learning, and they can amass information faster, but they still need people to make sense of it. And that's really my role. When they have this sea of knowledge, someone has to say, this is the important things. This is what the patient needs to know. This is what will be key to your patient's outcome. This is why you check and double check. The days are not smooth. There's intense concern about a patient. There's very, very critical focus at the beginning of a surgery. When it's over and you're talking to the family and you deliver their family member intact, it's the greatest feeling on earth. And I want the students to experience that. I want them to know that this is a profession capable of greatness. Isn't it wonderful? I mean, their life is before them. They've worked very hard. But this is the first time they can really focus it into a profession, career. That's a very exciting thing. I tell the dean that, the best day of the year is graduation. I see these people, their families are so proud. They've literally grown up before our eyes, and now they are doctors. It's something that society takes pride in, and I'm glad of that. But it's a responsibility we must earn, and that's what I try to teach. So that potential to help others is very special. Thank you very much. I am deeply honored for this quite unexpected honor. I wanted to just reflect briefly about the things that have inspired me and your role as regents in that process. Because you see, I believe that the University of Wisconsin is the great academic university. And it's not because of its buildings or its courses or its curriculum, it's because of its people and its ideas. And we each have a role in that. When I came to Wisconsin, I discovered an environment that made this possible. There were several characteristics that were essential. I first discovered that it was an environment of collaboration and purpose. And for the first time, I could actualize, which was a theory, that we together could do far more than I could do alone. I discovered Wisconsin had an environment that was open to ideas. And I don't mean the faculty ideas, I mean the students. They teach me, because that energy, that enthusiasm is inspirational. That's where the inspiration comes from. And finally, I found an environment where the work was service. And the service was the entire university, and yes, the borders of the great state of Wisconsin and beyond. That Wisconsin idea is very alive in the medical school. I found that a reason to come and to stay, because I found an environment that allowed me to build a Department of Neurological Surgery centered on patient care. The very best patient care in the world for brain tumors, for stroke, for pain, for spinal injury, for congenital defects of babies. I assure you, the best in the world. But I also assure you, none of us are satisfied with that status quo. We must improve the care for brain tumors, for stroke, for congenital defects in babies. That means research. And to have an environment that is open to ideas, that is collaborative, that serves, allows that research to happen. My faculty literally have to walk through or around their laboratory to get to the OR. It's part of every day. If you have that attitude, then teaching is part of every day, because we must promulgate that. And that teaching is the two-way street with the students and the patients that really actualizes that possibility. So in many ways, I'm very grateful to the University of Wisconsin for making that tripartite mission possible and having the opportunity, the purpose, the collaboration, and the service of ideas to make that happen. So I want to thank you, the Regents, as the people who guide and guard those ideals that make this the great university of America. And I want to thank the people of Wisconsin and our patients worldwide for inspiring us to do this, to allow us to serve and to work with them. For that, I'm very grateful, and I thank you all. Thank you.
We talk a lot about the Wisconsin idea and its threefold, the system's threefold mission of teaching, research, and service. But Dr. Dempsey had a line that I want to repeat, and I think it's an honor and it is humbling to be with someone who says that this profession is capable of greatness. I believe he personifies that. So it's a pleasure to honor him, and we are humbled by that, Dr. Dempsey. And thank you for introducing him, Dr. Golden. This is just one example of the great faculty committed to serving not only their students, but the people of this state and beyond. And it's just a privilege to be a part of that. So thank you. Regent President Bailey.
Thank you, President Cross. Let's move on to item number 6 on the agenda. At last month's meeting, members of the Education Committee heard an overview of a new advising software tool that is being implemented on 12 campuses. Today, as a full board, we're going to get a closer look at how this works. President Cross, can you get us started?
Yes, I'll try, Regent President Bailey. First, we need to understand that academic advising isn't what it used to be. Long ago, the days when I was as a faculty member, advising was primarily about helping students with scheduling and course registration. Today's academic advisors are expected to help students navigate college life, access resources and opportunities, and increase awareness of how their interests and abilities can connect their academic and career goals. In higher education circles, the positive impact of academic advising, greater engagement with students, and earlier interventions on increasing retention and graduation rates is well understood. Colleges and universities nationwide are giving greater attention to this critical function. UW-Eau Claire was one of 12 institutions nationwide selected last year to participate in a 2-year study of academic advising to help establish standards and a framework to evaluate and improve academic advising. The Excellence in Academic Advising project is sponsored by NACADA, the Global Community for Academic Advising, and the John Gardner Institution for Excellence in Undergraduate Education. So when we launched our 2020 Forward Strategic Framework in 2016, one of the key system-level priorities we identified was 360 advising, our term. It is our commitment to work to improve student success and to reduce time to degree by expanding the use of predictive analytics, intensive, some would say intrusive, advising, and other practices that provide timely support to students. Attention to this priority is also about equity and striving to ensure that all students have the opportunity to succeed. We recognize that all students don't come to college with the same learning opportunities or life experiences. We can talk about the many impacts these differences can have on students, but we know unequivocally that when it comes to college completion, the 4-year and 6-year graduation rates for our underrepresented minority students, first-generation college students, and Pell Grant recipients are lower than the rates for all new students in the UW system. These achievement gaps have been persistent over time, narrowing only slightly over the years. I've been in this business now for 42 years, and I'm frustrated. Just about every institution I know of has tried to address this in different ways, but the problem persists. We too have tried a lot of things as a system to move the needle, and yes, we've made some progress, as our improved graduation rates will attest, but it's not enough. We have to do more. It's imperative, on moral as well as economic grounds. We need to focus on how to ensure that once students come through our doors, they are provided with the support they need to succeed. As members of the Education Committee heard last month, the Navigate Student Success System is an advising workflow and student planning management software offered by the Educational Advisory Board. We refer to them as EAB. Based on predictive analytics like class attendance, performance, major status, financial factors, and more, this system helps advisors provide personalized guidance to students at key moments along their college career. Students can also use an app to get alerts, schedule meetings with advisors, and connect to campus resources. While this is leveraging technology to help students persist and graduate, it's much more than just data. It's about people and their relationships, particularly with faculty and student advisors, and the critical engagement we know students need with their advisors, faculty, and student affairs staff in order to be successful. It is about providing more support and more timely engagement with students when they need it most. 4 UW system institutions already use the Navigate system: Eau Claire, Milwaukee, Oshkosh, and Platteville. As we will hear from these campuses in a few minutes, EAB's Navigate system is no magic bullet, but it is a proven tool to improve the success of all students if we use it well. In particular, it's been shown to have an impact, a significant impact, on underrepresented minority students, first-generation college students, and of course, Pell Grants recipients. Accordingly, this past December, the Board of Regents approved a contract with EAB to purchase the Navigate Student Success Management System. Early stages of implementation are underway, and teams from System and EAB are expected to be on campuses to begin meeting with leadership teams later this month. To learn more about the Navigate Student Success System, we will first hear from Dr. Edward Vennett, Managing Director of EAB. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers after his presentation. And that will be followed, please go ahead, that will be followed by what we expect will be a robust discussion between board members and a panel that includes Johannes Britz, the provost at Milwaukee, John Coker, the provost at Oshkosh, Karen McClear, the Director of Retention and Academic Support at Platteville, Christine Navia, the Associate Vice President for System Office of Student Success, and Ben Passmore, Associate Vice President of the System Office for Policy Analysis and Research. This matter is at the core of our educational mission, and I'm looking forward to a healthy discussion. So to get us started, please join me in welcoming Dr. Edward Bennett.
Thank you. And I just wanted to introduce Dr. Bennett. He is a managing director with EAB. He is their expert, their leading expert on this subject, on student success, retention, graduation advising, and financial aid. And before, although he's many years in this field, before that he received his PhD in evolutionary biology from Duke University, as well as an undergraduate. And without further ado, I'll just hand it over.
Thank you very much, everyone. Hi, my name's Ed Bennett. Go by Ed, not Edward, so feel free to just call me that. Very, very glad to be speaking with you here today. As you can see, the name of the presentation is the Business Case for Student Success. We're going to get into that in a moment, and I'll explain what that is. I want to explain a little bit more about the firm, who I am, and what it is that you got yourself into with this, just to provide a little bit more background before we get into what we've learned and where we're trying to take our institutions nationwide. So EAB as a firm, we really don't think of ourselves as a tech vendor. We think about ourselves as an organization devoted to operational excellence. For that, you often need technology. We are primarily a research firm that also provides consultative services and develops tools based on our research to implement change on campus. So while we'll talk a lot about the tech today, the overall goal here is actually to change your outcomes, and more importantly, change the underlying processes to achieve those outcomes. I've been with the firm since the very beginning. I think I was employee number 8. We now have 1,400, and a lot of the work we do is around enrollment in various shapes and forms. Incoming student enrollment, as well as returning student enrollment, which is just another way to say student retention. All of my work, my research here has been on student success. What does that have to do with biology? Almost nothing at all. I made a pivot when I was in my early 30s, like many people do. And I'm really glad I did, because this is incredibly fulfilling work, and it allows me to come speak to folks like you about these issues. So I'm hoping to share some of that. Quickly, a bit about the platform. Just so you know what the tech is, we don't have any slides on it. That wasn't the point of the presentation today, but I did want to give you a sense of what's in there and who uses it and what in a very brief summary. There are really 3 components. The workforce part of it is what the advisors use. You mentioned this already, Dr. Cross. It is a CRM-like platform, if you're familiar with those in your businesses or day-to-day life. A lot of communication tools, record keeping, in this particular case, shared collaboration around, say, a student who needs help from an advisor at the financial aid office in the Career Center, or mental health, or residence life, where we're allowing people to collaborate on those. We're also exposing advisors to a lot more information about their students than they've ever had before. Stuff that was locked inside your SIS, but they would have a hard time getting to, but actually is quite valuable. For instance, does the student have a bursar hold? It's unbelievable how many advisors wouldn't know that while they're trying to get a student registered when the student can't be registered. There's also a predictive analytics component. What we're trying to do is help advisors understand high, medium, and low risk students within their cohorts and deploy differential care accordingly. And I do have some slides for that. It's equity-based care. We want high-risk students to get more of it and low-risk students to get only what they need so that we can deploy those resources elsewhere. On the administrator side, we have a series of intelligence components, we call it that. Think dashboards, business intelligence. We also have a feature we call effectiveness analytics that allows you to do A/B comparisons of initiatives. So to understand essentially what the impact is. On the student side, there are integrated features around academic planning and actually a mobile app that is supposed to help a student walk through an entire semester and make sure they don't miss any of the pivotal moments that a student needs to do to simply remain enrolled and also then thriving during that semester. These are all integrated together. We're the only system on the planet that brings all these things together into one single integrated system such that all the users can see the appropriate amount of information for them, which is really very cool. It's not point solutions networked together. It's a single solution. And that's about the limit of what I'll talk about with the tech here, unless you have additional questions. I would like to get into my slides, but I'll say my preferred style is to running Q&A rather than at the end. So if you have a question, jump in at any point in this. Let me provide a little background here on how we got here. First of all, this is me right here. A little less gray hair in my professional headshot, but that's okay. If you are into puns or Twitter, follow me at Higher Ed Bennett. I'll tweet out the latest news and insights. Right there. Also a way to blow me up while I'm speaking for anybody in the peanut gallery if you want. I've got a watch that buzzes every single time something happens on Twitter, so it's a way to mess with me while I'm talking, if you want. A couple of years ago, we started looking at success in a slightly different way than most, and the reason was you kind of forced us to. When schools come on board with us, they sign contracts that are, of a certain number of years in length, but you don't give us a decade. And you want to see results over that time. You specifically want to see results that say, hey, this investment paid for itself, or we got a bigger return than we put in. As a result, we began framing case studies a few years ago in terms of not just improved retention, but also the dollars associated with that retention. As far as we know, we're the first ones to do this in kind of a broad scale way, essentially because we're for profit. We had to do that just to prove the value. Interestingly enough, in doing that enough times, we began to realize, gosh, this stuff actually really does pay for itself. That you are not if you are a tech-enabled advising office, you are not a cost center. You're a revenue center. You're more akin to an admissions office because you're enrolling a second-year class or a third-year class, and those students pay you tuition as well. Well, that opens up a whole range of possibilities for how you might begin to invest and reinvest in your students. And I want to walk you through the logic here. Again, I'm a researcher, so I want to be able to tell you about the ideas behind these and what it matters for your school. I also want to do it very briefly because I know I only have a few minutes for these remarks, so I won't bore you to death with the whole thing. I'll do a quick time check right now. Okay. Any questions about that? If not, we'll dive right in. All right, cool. So this is a moment in time when we really need to take this on as a country. This is a map of American higher educational attainment by age, and you see there the green is people who didn't finish high school, teal is high school graduates, orange are associate's degree holders, red are bachelor's, and blue are post-secondaries. Over there on the left side, you see a bunch of lazy 4-year-olds that haven't accomplished anything in their life. You would not believe the incredible illiteracy rate among 4-year-olds in this country. The joke usually goes over a little better, but okay. I happen to have a couple 4-year-olds in my life, some of them that happen to live in your state. I have close ties to Wisconsin. My sister and brother-in-law are at Eau Claire and Stout, respectively, and live in Eau Claire. So, if you happen to be anybody at Stout, please give my brother-in-law a raise. He's in the econ department. So, the people that I care most about on this chart, though, are right here. These are the Americans that have some college and no degree. It's about 1 in 5 Americans. They have, when they leave school, an average of $5,000 to $8,000 in debt, and they default on that debt at a rate of 17%. For them, college was a gamble, and they lost. Their life is actually economically much harder now because they tried to improve it. This is unacceptable to me. This is what keeps me up at night and is what keeps me in this job, and I rally against it. So I'm looking to do more research on this. If you have thoughts about this, please come up and talk to me afterwards, but this to me is a great evil that we need to fix. We also have a challenge, and this is the moment in time to do it. I want to lay out the case for why I think there's going to be an actual really big change over the next decade in how we approach this. What you're looking at here is data on the growth in high school graduates going back to 2001, and actually you could draw that line all the way back to the early 90s. Consistently 1.5% growth every single year in high school graduates. If you are a leader in times of growth, your operational imperative is basically don't make any sudden moves. Let's keep doing everything the way we're doing it. Literally, nobody in this room has ever managed through a crisis like we're about to see in higher ed when it comes to enrollment. It's never happened in our careers, not even during the recession. Well, there's been stagnation in growth over the last few years, and in some areas of the country decline. And for the rest of us, there will be big time decline by the end of the next decade. Why? Our birth rates fell by 15% during the recession. They never recovered. So if you add 18 years to 2010, you get higher education's apocalypse year, which is 2028. That's when the Mayans should have actually circled the calendar. That's the year in which we will all begin to crumble from an enrollment standpoint, unless you happen to be an Ivy League institution. So you still are desirable at that point. And let me walk through the logic behind why that is. This is the US. You may recognize it. Here we are. The little circles are our cities. This is all data from a great book called Demographics and the Demand for Higher Education by a guy named Nathan Graw. I highly recommend you pick it up, but I'll summarize his argument for you here. He didn't just look at high school graduates. He went and looked at essentially college-going high school graduates. These are the areas of the country over the next 5 years that are still planning on growing at a rate of at least 1.5%. Good news, you're one of them. Bad news, look at your neighbors. They're in decline. A lot of them are in decline. Illinois is coming for your kids. So is Michigan. And so is Indiana. And then it just gets worse as you go farther out. This is out to 2029. Now everybody's in decline because, again, of that birth dearth during the recession. So unless you happen to be in Idaho or Montana or San Diego, not too many people are. So this is a challenge ahead of us. Now, when I was in college, and when even many of us before that, public institutions were about 25% supported by students, by tuition dollars. Everywhere across the country since then, there has been, reductions. Most public institutions are now over half of their money comes from students. You are tuition dependent. All of you are. Well, that's a real problem when the students are in decline, obviously, as we just described there. So you're relying on a customer base that is shrinking, and that's going to have to change. Well, the customer base will continue to shrink. Your approach to it will have to change. There's a mindset that is an ROI mindset here. If you increase your retention rates, you will increase your enrollment. It's mathematically impossible to do that, to not do that, I should say. That increases your revenue, which allows you to invest in your students, which further increases your retention rate. This is a virtuous cycle. You can also see it go the other direction and be a death spiral. If you don't improve or you let your enrollment shrink, you have fewer resources. The quality of education you deliver will shrink, and then the whole thing keeps getting worse. So this is the time to do this. We're trying to get schools to adopt an ROI mindset around success because we know it pays for itself. And the thing that is most important here is I'm trying to get people to break free of their perceived budgetary constraints around success. Student success is not a cost center, it's a revenue center. And if you recognize that and can put numbers behind it, you can make great investments for the health of your institution, but more importantly, for the quality of your students and the experience that they get. The problem is nobody really knows how to do this when it comes to success. Here's an example from Wayne State. Monica Brockmeyer, a good friend of mine, they're doing a ton of stuff at Wayne. If you haven't followed this story, they're amazing. They're rising like a phoenix from the flames. The entire city of Detroit is, and they're along with students over there on the left. It's a ton of things, including working with us on a bit of it. They've been able to quantify that this is generating quite a bit of additional revenue. We're talking about over $5 million in additional tuition and credit attempts. So I asked Monica, which of these initiatives have ROI? And she goes, Ed, I can tell you the ROI of all of our student success initiatives, but I can't tell you the ROI of any of them because it's impossible to differentiate which ones are contributing to this game. And that to me is just a failure in knowledge here, but it's a failure that's not because of a negligence, we just haven't had the data systems to be able to do this until now. We're trying to get our schools to begin to run these numbers in such a scientific way that they can directly attribute revenue gains to activities. So we made an investment here and we saw a return on investment that would be like this. Those of you who run businesses do this reflexively all the time. Those of you who run universities, sometimes, oftentimes not with this. We work with advisors primarily, so I'm very interested in the ROI of advisors. Do human beings pay for themselves? If you invest in more people, will you get a return in surplus of what it cost you? I spent the entire last summer looking for examples of schools that have actually run these analyses in ways that I could consider, okay, the investment here is directly attributable to a financial gain. I found very few examples. Schools just hadn't run the numbers. Actually, at a board meeting at East Tennessee, I found a guy who had. He drew this on the back of a napkin, and I converted it into a slide. East Tennessee made an investment in 12 first-year advisors when they previously had none in 2014. We estimate advisors cost you about 60 grand a year in salary, benefits, and overhead. Standard number, adjust accordingly, according to your own budget. Those 12 advisors, as you can see over there on the left side, and then down, cost about $720,000, $720,000 a year to the institution. In the first year, they generated a 3% gain in first-year retention. And since these advisors were applied to all first-year students and they weren't really doing anything else that year, they felt very comfortable attributing that 3% to those 12 people. Those 12 people generated an additional 60 sophomores, which at $8,000 in net tuition per student comes in just under $500,000. They operated in the red the first year. But by the second year, sophomores have an amazing quality, they become juniors. 60 sophomores became 51 juniors, became 43 seniors, followed by 2 cohorts behind them. By the end of 3 years, they had an additional 154 students, which was generating $1.2 million in revenue, while still just costing them the original $720,000. So they're operating in a surplus here. This is a 1.6 ROI. Every single time I've been able to get a school to tease apart these numbers since I started showing this slide, it has come out positive. These human beings pay for themselves. Advising is a revenue center, not a cost center. Think of it like an admissions office, but for your returning students, if you will. You want to fill a sophomore class, you want to fill a junior class. There's been work done by the Gates Foundation about what happens when you put technology into this situation. East Tennessee just had human beings and they were working with students, but what if you enable these humans with tech like ours? They had something called the IPASS initiative, which is not the tollway in Illinois, but in fact stands for Integrated Planning and Advising for Student Success. This is what the Gates Foundation does. It creates acronyms and also funds things. You can see the things that are included in IPASS are a lot of the things we just discussed: early alerts, predictive models, types of intervention, degree planning, communication tools. Half of the 25 schools that were in the IPASS initiative were our schools, 13 of them. And the analysis done by our PK group showed that just the first year, remember, these folks are pioneers, so these are probably the conservative low-end numbers of what is possible, saw an average of a point plus in retention and more in the future. They actually went then tracked the net revenue gains, and this is accounting for cost as well. So this is true ROI here. And on average, these schools generated $40,000 in surplus revenue if you take out all the costs. So then again, this is a revenue center. The top performing school did almost $6 million in additional revenue as a result of this. So what were they really doing? Well, they were making a big investment in tech and people. RBK broke down the cost of what exactly IPASS is. And since you are now all effectively IPASS schools, this is probably what will look like something on your campus. And I've seen these results replicated in other studies. Of all the cost, only 20% of it is actually technology. 70% of it is human. Now, they took a lot of existing staff, the current advising personnel, and converted them to be tech-enabled advisors. And they also added in some new personnel like East Tennessee did. But the vast majority of people here, or the vast majority of cost here, is people. So we naturally want to focus on the people and think about, could we improve the efficiency? Could we make this even stronger and improve these numbers? And again, this is all, this is live research right now. I'm working on this as we go. And if anybody has any thoughts about this afterwards, please come find me because I want to learn from you. The actual nature of who these advisors is changing, and we think this will improve efficiency. You alluded to it at the very beginning. The nature of what an advisor is has fundamentally shifted across the course of the last few years. If you ask longer in the tooth advisors, what is advising? Professional advisors, not the faculty. They draw something on the left. I know because I've actually asked them to draw it. They consider themselves at a core to be academic planners. They're Virgils for navigating the university's academic circles of hell. If you wrap around that some student success, you basically get their job. Over on the right, you see what the new job descriptions, the ones that have been written in the last 3 years or so, look like. These are holistic advisors. Academic planning is an important part of their job, but they also understand a little bit about the student's financial health. They might know that they're on a bursar hold or how much unmet need they have. They will do a bit of early career preparation, and they will actually be accountable for the student's academic performance. Go ahead.
Yeah, that model on the right-hand side, you're going to have to break down a lot of walls, I would think, at all the universities you go into.
Mm-hmm.
How do you break down the walls, and where should that advisor be housed?
Yeah, that's actually the exact topic of what I'm doing in 2019. So when I leave this table, I will join a call with 13 of your colleagues at other schools to understand where their org charts are and what questions they have about it. Advising, as it is oftentimes a big investment. It lives either in student affairs, academic affairs, or increasingly enrollment management. What I do is want to study this year exactly where it is and who it should belong to. Oftentimes when we see schools make these conversions, they are repurposing existing staff. Schools that don't have staff are just hiring straight out like this and putting where it makes sense in their school. There's not a consensus on the right way to do it yet. But if I'm invited back in a year from now, I'll be able to present those results. Great question. These folks they're not shown on the slide is kind of how they do their job. These folks on the right are typically much younger. They're often recent grads. So think about 22 or 23-year-old, maybe doesn't cost you $60K a year, but are really in touch with the students, and basically you can get them to do a lot of work for not a lot of money. And they're really tech enabled, and you can tell them to be extremely proactive and go after their cohort. These are your 300 students, get as many of them back as you possibly can. And that's essentially what we're trying to do with them. We are happy to provide anybody in this room with a bank of about 24 different job descriptions for you to leaf through if you're looking to make an investment like this on your campus. We think that there's ways to improve the organization of staff to improve the ROI of advising. So if we already know that we're operating in a surplus, how do we do even more? Well, we can actually operate more efficiently. Here's your typical advising office. You've got a mixture of people. You're paying them different amounts of money because, well, you got your rank and file 60K advisors, but you may have someone who's an expert who's been around for a long time, has a fancy degree, is a really, really stellar person, and you've paid them over the years to do so, maybe up to 120K. Let's say this advising office has 5 people, 301 caseloads, which is the national standard. We're asking for 4 touch points a year, either be phone or digital. Or sorry, in-person, phone, or digital. Well, in this case, you're paying $60 per touch point. What if we reorganize the staff and unlock the value of that person that you're paying so much more for? And the way we're going to do that is we're actually going to make them a high-risk specialist. We're getting a much smaller caseload of the highest-risk students. A predictive model can tell you who are your highest-risk students. We're going to ask them to do 12 touch points a year, 1 every 2 weeks. This is, again, also a nationally emerging best practice, and it's really effective. Well, you take your other 4 advisors, you redistribute the caseloads. Now they're 350 to 1, but the average caseload's a little bit lower risk, so that's okay. You're still asking for the 4 touch points. We now unlocked enough value that we're now getting $53 per touch point. So without spending an extra dime, we've actually helped improve the care we're providing to our highest risk students, which should then improve their success rates by a lot, usually 5 to 10 points. This suggests a pyramidal structure. This is the ultimate end goal of where we're trying to get to. We want our this is not an org chart. This is just an organizational way as far as how you're delivering care. You got your highest risk folks up there that at the very top. Sorry, your highest paid folks with your highest risk students at the top. The rank and file in the middle, and down below, we're actually looking for really inexpensive ways to create touch points for maybe the lowest risk cases on campus. This is an advising strategy that is equity based. I mean equity in the sense of that cartoon of the 3 guys trying to watch a baseball game over the fence. If you've ever seen that one, the short guy needs to stand on 2 boxes, the middle guy just 1 box, the tall guy doesn't need any boxes. Same thing here. At the top of the pyramid, you've got your highest risk students. They need a massive amount of care. They need to be surrounded with the care. This is actually borrowed from, appropriately enough, a healthcare model called population health management, if you're familiar with that, where your highest risk patients require a coordinated care network around them, and we've borrowed that language as well. In the middle, you've got professional advisors who are doing a lot of proactive monitoring. They're not just waiting for a student to come in and say, I have a problem, help me. They're actually reaching out to their cohort using data that we are providing, both simple and complex data, to haul students in the office and say, we need to have a conversation about something. Or it's about time you declared your major, don't you think? Or you have a hold, I want to help you clear that. Or I've noticed you weren't doing well in your pre-calc course. We got to make sure you're set up because you're an engineering student. Pre-calc's important, that kind of thing. Below, at our lowest risk students, which hopefully is the majority of your student body, these are the kids that are going to graduate no matter what you do to them. And for here, we want to provide the lowest cost possible advisement that we can. We're not going to deny them advising, but if we can do things through the faculty, through peer advising, which is incredibly effective and inexpensive, or through scalable e-advising websites, the equivalent of WebMD, but also our mobile app, academic planning, allows students to do things on their own. There's a way to really, really scale from here. And the idea here is that by structuring in this way, we can deliver care in a far more efficient way. This is emerging right now, and there's a limited number of case studies. I'm working on developing a few right now. The ones that we've seen, this really works. It's much more effective and more cost effective. Go ahead.
Thank you. You just used the word kids, and maybe you didn't mean to do that.
Excuse me, I shouldn't have.
I've been thinking about the high school graduates that we're all going to be increasingly chasing based on the first part of your discussion, and the very different needs of adult learners.
Yes.
So I wonder if you could speak to that.
I'd be happy to, and you're right, I should not have used the word kids. That was a nervous moment right there. The average age of an undergraduate these days is creeping up. We know that there's tremendous amount of growth in the 25 to 34-year-old group of undergraduates. They are oftentimes online, so that's a need. They are oftentimes part-time, so that's a need. They have kids, they have jobs, and they have lives that they're trying to navigate around, far more complex than 18-year-olds. Biggest challenge with this group is providing services when they need them, which might be in the evenings or on the weekends or in a online type format. This is not something that schools that are traditionally set up for the 18-year-old full-time student naturally are able to do. So investment there. You guys are actually really well set up for this because the integration of the 2-year and the 4-year schools in Wisconsin, the 2-year schools have a lot of this figured out, or at least they've been working on it for years because this has been their student body for years. So looking for inspiration from them is a really smart moment for the 4-year schools to go to. The last thing I'll say about the adult learners is how do you actually get them to even want to enroll in the first place? How do you find them? An 18-year-old is relatively easy to enroll. You know where they are. They're in history class in your high school somewhere. Well, you can find them because they're 18 and you know what their intentions are. They're going to go to college or not, but they're easy to market to. Adults, a range of people that could be 2 decades long, who may have interest in higher ed, may even have some credits, but also are trying to navigate work, family, and other aspects of their lives, may want to go to school, but may not be ready to go to school. Or maybe they are, but they don't know what they're trying to do. So even trying to find these folks is now the science here. And we're actually using a considerable amount of consumer data to try to figure out who's an eligible or likely student, and then provide schools with that information so that they can go recruit more efficiently to bring in those adults. Because you're right, you'll need them. You absolutely will need them. Other questions about this before I move on to the last couple slides?
Regents, other questions? Regent Whitburn.
So the guy or the lady at 120 is supervising the younger people, newer people at 60?
Sorry?
The top of the chart, the person, the more experienced person.
This is not meant to be an organizational chart. Not in a you'll likely have an advising director over all of these folks.
How often do you find the more experienced person, the person bringing down the higher bucks, bound up in what worked in 1995, disinclined to pick up on the nuances of what we need today?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. One amazing quality about advisors is, this is not a doctor, lawyer, Wall Street type job. You're doing this because you really care about the students. If you've got someone who is engaged in their professional development to the point where they've earned that kind of salary, they're likely engaged in being able to do much more with their students. If they are not, then one of the things we're trying to work with schools is about how do you turn that staff over in some way or find another home for that person if you don't want to let them go, because a lot of these folks do need a little, hey, the times have changed. You need to change along with them, or we need to change without you. That's an extremely tough conversation, and it's one that every single onset I go to, more or less, that question comes up in some way, shape, or form. We don't have a great answer. Give us 2 more years and we'll have a great answer for you. That's a huge impediment, for sure. Hi.
Regent Milner.
I've got a question about, families and students are becoming far more sophisticated about the cost and the lost costs. You talked about the persons who tried to go to school and didn't finish, and that cost becomes a burden. How do you factor in the success at retention into the marketing? Because to me, I see those two going hand in hand. Because if retention is really a profit center, an expense that's actually a profit center, so is marketing.
Yes.
And factoring in that for the increasing sophistication of families and individuals about the cost, the relative cost of higher education. How do you do that? How do you see that happening? That's one question. And then I have another question without raising my hand, factoring into what Jerry had to say, which is very often your 120K is an administrator, or perhaps, if you'll excuse me, has moved up because of the Peter Principle. And in that case, what you're saying is you need to educate the institution about how the person that actually needs to be there.
So let
So
me answer
two
your second
questions.
question, and I'll go to your first one, because the first one's a lot more nuanced. The second one is, for a large number of schools, I'm not implicating anybody in this room, but for a large number of schools that I've worked with, I've noticed that folks don't even know what they're paying their advisors. So they don't have annual reviews, the budgets are not fully transparent, and nobody's really even asked the question of the directors very often, is your staff well organized? They're just collecting raises each year. So it's kind of perpetuating this way. The reason I don't have a great answer here is that very few have actually fully asked the question. I think people are now starting to ask the question quite a bit more, and I'm looking for the answers so I can collect them and bring them back to you. But in my understanding, basically, is it's kind of not being looked at. If you are used to looking at these sort of things as a for-profit business, understand that a nonprofit university either may not do it because of what it is, or just not have the wherewithal to do it. That's changing. Now, for the first question, these Gen Z students, the ones that are hitting campus right now, are very different than millennials. They are similar to them in many ways, but one thing that is very different, if any of you have an 18-year-old in your life, they were 8 when the recession hit. It is their formative experience. It is their, for me, challenge or disaster. Or right, there you go. It is the thing that molded their early perception of the world. They are incredibly value-driven. They're not cheapskates, but they want to know what they're paying for, they're going to get value for. Now, they all assume they're going to graduate from college. We've actually taken a look at this. So hey, come here and you're guaranteed to graduate, or come here, our graduation rate is 80%, or whatever it might be, actually isn't a very great marketing message for them. What they want to hear is, come here and you'll be able to go here. Come here and we'll have a degree that will launch you into this. Come here, even if you go to a 2-year school, you can start off inexpensively and then end up, say, at UWM or something along those lines. And we have a pathway for that to make sure that that's going to happen for you. They want to hear success stories along those lines. Where they get the value from understanding graduation rates isn't in the marketing material that says a certain percentage point. They get it from their older siblings and their next door neighbors and the other folks in their community that they know who went to a school and had a good outcome or a bad outcome as a result, who got what they were promised or they didn't get what they were promised, got the value or they didn't. So recognizing Gen Z as extreme value shoppers, sell to their value. So say, hey, this is what you're going to get from your investment, less so than around a number. But of course, the numbers are tied up in that.
Thank you.
This is something that's a very active research topic right now. So come to us later if you want to know a lot more about that.
Regent Jones.
I wonder if, in theory at least, these sort of predictive analytic models could be applied at the high school level.
Oh, wow. Well, they're starting to work on that. High school is a little more challenging because the graduation rates are far higher. And what is it that you're trying to predict? I'm not enough of an expert in K through 12 to be able to fully explain where the frontier of innovation is on that. But what I've heard is folks are trying to predict things like disruptive behavior, less so than the student may not finish high school. They know who's in trouble from a finishing standpoint. They don't need a model to tell them that. It's more about when are things going to happen, that sort of stuff. And I'm not sure about where the frontier of innovation is there.
But if the technology could be designed to identify students who are behind in high school and intervene and encourage them to graduate, that's good news for higher education.
It should be, because there'll be more graduates.
Right.
I'd actually go a little earlier and get after the 3rd graders. Because what you're actually looking for is, are you developing academic competencies even that early on? Basically, your reading level in 3rd grade dictates what's going to happen to you for the rest of your life, as things are right now.
Regent Delgado.
Yes, I'm trying to visualize how your, sorry if I say your software, your system, I don't want to mischaracterize it, helps identify the early issues with the student,
Yeah.
Education and health are very similar. Catch it early, keep them healthy and we're in good shape, let them go sick and things are bad
So
and
what are
expensive.
the
The question
input?
I have, what does your data do? I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we have grades,
So there's a lot of,
brownies in the emails, whatever is
Yeah.
it, what is it that you're monitoring that in fact is giving us information? And remember that the person getting the information is a young person, so they themselves, he or she doesn't have a lot of experience.
yeah, it's a great question. Let me say that, first of all, when you're talking about analytics, you're building the amount of information you have about a student across the course of their experience with you. So an incoming student, we don't have a lot. You know, we have what is on your high school transcript. We have some demographic information about you, your home zip code, the high school you went to. Do you have developmental coursework in your future because of a test that you took? Those sorts of things. As you experience the campus and interact with the campus, we collect a lot more information. A lot of it is still grades. Sorry?
You say we collect information on each individual?
Yes, every individual student, we're pulling transcripts.
And that's the information we collect today?
Yes, you have it in your data systems right now, and we are pulling it into our system, running our analytics on it, and then feeding back to you what is essentially a risk score on the analytics side. There are other kinds of analytics that are associated with this, which I'll get into in just a moment, but I'm trying to lay out the predictive side of things right now. We're basically looking at standardized, a lot of transcript information, demographic information. These are all very solid and robust information. We'd like to get into interaction with the campus, so things like swipe cards. The learning management system is a wealth of information, but difficult to tap. Survey data from students, any of this stuff we could put into the model, but every model has that at its core, the academic performance and student traits that I just described. These are correlated to past students. So a student that has these sorts of grades, who has this sort of background, you have had hundreds of them in the past, they tend to succeed at this rate. Ergo, we forecast that this student will succeed at this rate unless something changes for them. Here's a really good example, very concrete. There are courses on your campus right now where you can pass the course with a C. And the graduation rate for a student with a C is only marginally better than if they had failed the class. And we're talking about foundational stuff like intro chem. It's different for every school and every major which courses those are. But that is a forecast, a prediction that can be made off of a single grade. Now, imagine you had all the students' grades and all the courses and their context for these. Then you can get a really nice, robust understanding of exactly what it is, or what the likelihood is that the student will succeed and succeed in the major that they're in.
So your software basically looks at the data, looks at some history you're built up. I'm assuming you're building up in a population of all other campuses that are using the same data?
We only use an institution's own data for itself. So we're not comparing even Platteville to Eau Claire. It's just Platteville's data for Platteville.
I'm gonna let you go on that one because otherwise I'm gonna take all the time. I'm
Okay, fair
intrigued because, you know, I'm familiar with garbage in, garbage out. Okay? And I'm very concerned with the collection of data and the accuracy of it, you know?
Yeah, so are we.
I'm trying to get a feel for the validity of what you're doing, given what is available for us to use.
So there have been plenty of, and I want to address that because you hit a really, really important point. We've taken a very conservative approach to analytics compared to what others in our space have gone at. Some have said, we'll just take everything and do something cool with it. We wanted to make sure that we had data that we knew we had 10 years worth of very solid, standardized records that could create a comparable for a student's. Chem 101 now is probably pretty similar to what Chem 101 was 4 years ago, that sort of thing. As it turns out, there are very few data systems on your campus that have that kind of standardization. Transcripts are certainly one of them. Student records are certainly one of them. A lot of the other information that I just described has less of it's more of the garbage in kind of approach. Even the data that we get has to be rigorously cleaned. And one of the processes that many of you will go through over the course of the next few months is our data teams actually cleaning up your own data so that we can get good, accurate predictions. And then there's a whole validation process that happens after that to make sure our model matches up with the reality of the institution. If we're popping out something that looks like, hey, the student's read, well, that can't be possible. She has a 3.8 GPA. Well, we have to understand what we're wrong in our math. But that QA process is what we do to ensure that what we're putting back to you is not garbage out.
Regent Creeby.
Thank you. This is compelling. You've provided a significant amount of compelling information as to why this is a financial imperative for our system and our campuses. I'd suggest, as based on or consistent with one of your first slides, that this is as much of, if not more, of a moral imperative for us to address. That cohort, I think it was in red, of students who have some college but don't finish, that's a group that I think we, again, have a moral imperative to address. So let me make an observation and ask you to react. You've talked about a voluminous amount of data, metrics, tools, models that can be used to address this issue, all of which are undoubtedly extremely valuable. But if this is a moral imperative, then the change that we probably need to invoke is as much attitudinal and philosophical as it is data-driven. So I'd like you to react to that, but then I have a question. What have you seen in terms of success and failure at various institutions in changing the attitude toward what advising means and what it ought to be?
That's a fantastic question. I'd like to answer it, both of the questions, with my next two slides. So team me up very well. Thank you very much. He's a plant, by the way. This is the change. It's always been a moral imperative. We've always wanted to graduate more students, but we haven't been able to make a lot of progress. We're making a little progress. Haven't made a lot of progress because, and I had it described to me this morning, imagine a garden. You're growing things. We're interested in things that are growing. You know, we've got advising offices, we've got this support, that support, where higher ed hasn't spent enough time, and a lot of them wither. Where we haven't spent enough time with our garden is the fertilizer. So building the root base, building the thing that's bound on. The reason why I'm giving this presentation right now is, of course, it's always been the moral imperative. Why haven't we able to deliver on it? Because we haven't figured out the financial side of things. Here's a school that has. This is Georgia State. They make a lot of news about their success. And Tim Rennick, who's a good friend of ours, explained their budget model, essentially. And it's so simple, but at the same time, I've never heard of a single other school that does it this way. Tim controls the entire student success enterprise. And as part of that, he said, everything we're going to do here is going to try to have a self-sustainable component to it. When we retain more students, we generate more revenue. I want 60% of that to reinvest, because now we have a business process, a budget process that is meant to continuously improve on it. Schools that lack that are putting money on things and then they don't know what happens, and then maybe it goes away when the grant goes away, something along those lines. The schools that I see be the most successful are the schools that have, maybe they don't have this exact model here, but they've thought about leadership and organization in a much deeper way than most other institutions have. Most other institutions are the ones who take this problem, which is an institution level problem, it is at a provost or a president level, and kick it down to a director and say, this is yours to solve. That fails.
So maybe you answered what my question really was, which is, we know what these schools that have succeeded have done. Why have they done it?
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm driving at, the why. Why do they take these actions, and what do we need to put in place to be sure we do the same?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of why. The moral imperative is certainly the main why, but they're being pushed by, say, their local Chamber of Commerce. Hey, we need more degree holders. We need to hire these folks. You know, this is an economic opportunity for the state of Georgia, and that's actually one of the reasons they got into it, was Georgia Tech and UGA started moving up the food chain. There were a ton of students left in Georgia with no real place to go. Georgia State said this is a massive opportunity for us to sweep in, grab these students, have them have an incredibly elevated experience compared to what they used to, and feed back into our local economy, which is Atlanta, and in a way that's never been done before in Atlanta. For the Georgia students that we have. So there's a lot of whys about this. I don't know if that's getting to what you're asking, but the externalities about why these schools are pushed. You're part of the community. I mean, you're in a really, really important engine of innovation and production for the community when it comes to, well, this. Right? The most important thing we've got out there is our collective human mind, and being able to go after that in such a way that it improves the overall economy. There's some really interesting phenomenon about states with red governors. Red governors in Tennessee, Georgia, Texas, Florida have made some of the biggest improvements in student success by pushing the economic issues and linking the public-private partnership, if you will, in these states. And I think that's a big, big push for the future. It's not just because, hey, we want to deliver value to our students. We're delivering value to students because there's a really, really important reason for that. We need this to remain competitive as a country.
Regent Tyler.
So I'd like to stretch a little bit and say, so in Wisconsin, if we ask high school seniors, about 50% say they're coming to the university, about 37% show up, about 25% say they're going to tech college, about 17% show up. So if we add the 37 and the 17 together, we get 54. If every one of those was successful, we fail to meet the need of the economy for post-secondary credentials. So I understand the process that you're working on and bringing to the table helps get that 54 to graduation. The challenge is we've got a goal, a 60-forward goal to get post-secondary credentials to 60%, and that's not anywhere near close enough to what we need. I mean, we need probably 80, maybe 90. So back to Regent Jones' question about, high school, we've got a wide variety of relationships with the universities and the technical colleges that reach into the high schools, whether it's dual enrollment or advanced placement or other. It feels like, we talk about silos a lot, it feels like we're working in the university silo and we're dealing with the pipe that's coming in, but we're not reaching through the pipe and grabbing that other 30, 40% that we need on the other side of the wall. And so the question that I've got is there potential at some point down the road to latch on to these folks that have started down the road when they're juniors and seniors in high school, get the road paved, get the guardrails up, and get them into our post-secondary institutions?
You better believe it. There absolutely is. And again, this is something where I turn to the two-year schools as leaders here. For years, they've been setting up admissions officers, basically, in high schools. They'll send people out to high schools and sit there in cafeterias, get them to fill out FAFSAs and applications, and they'll even go so far as to work their dual enrollment students the same way. I mean, these are dual enrollment students that are high school students enrolled in a two-year school to get advanced coursework because they're the best of the best they got, and then building that pipeline that way. That has actually really tightened the relationship between the two-year and the high school. Four-year schools don't have as much of that going on, but could learn some lessons there. And I'd even go further back. Why are you starting junior high or earlier? And no, I don't have a good answer for you. We are but a piece of this larger story, but is basically what you just described, the national challenge.
Yeah, it would really be exciting if we could see those, what those analytics that say, why do people fall off the road? Yeah, in that transition from K-12 into post-secondary.
There's so many inefficiencies in the pipeline that if I had another 3 hours to be able to talk to you about, I'll just give you a couple quick ones.
I live near Eau Claire. We should talk.
Well, swing by. Next time I go see Chris and Kate. There's massive inefficiencies around the migration of students between institutions. So you just talked about a couple breaks in the pipeline right there. I'll add some more. The students move between your schools within the system. The credit articulations, if they are not solid, reduce efficiency. A student might take 135 credits to get 120. And not because they failed anything, but because some of those didn't apply when they moved. That to me is a real problem and a discouragement of that. So many students started a two-year school with the intention of getting a bachelor's degree. So few of them actually do. That's a bad break in the pipeline, in my opinion. Then you look within a campus, and you look at what's challenging students. If you'll permit a quick story, some of the things that we've learned from our work, from simply asking students why you're not returning, reveal some massive, massive leaks. Here's a quick story from Kennesaw State in Georgia. A guy named Chris Hutt used our system in the most simple way you could possibly use this system. He sent an email. He created a filtered list, which is something that we provide advisors, which is just a magical tool for them, believe it or not. Also, being able to text a student from the system is also a really magical tool because they prefer not to use their own phones. You can understand why. But he sent an email. He pulled a list of 4,000 students at Kennesaw who had gotten a 3.0 or better in the past term. He did this the day after grades posted. 4,000 students with 3.0 or better, their best students, who were not registered for the fall. And he sent them a 34-word email. I memorized it. Hey, congratulations on the great semester you had. Noticed you weren't registered for the fall. Anything I can do to help? Then he went to lunch. And then he came back and freaked out because he got 1,100 responses. Anybody who works with students and sends emails to students and you got a 25% response rate on an email within a couple hours, that's nuts. Nobody gets that. But he did it because he intentionally designed the email to fit on a single phone screen with a clear call to action and a friendly tone. Those 1,100 responses, there was 1,100 students saying, I need this particular thing fixed for me to come back. Turns out there were 6 main categories of things that were broken at Kennesaw. So he takes it up the leadership ranks. And they start working through all those 6 systemic changes that are creating leaks even within their own campus. I've got another really, really quick story, which is UCF, the University of Central Florida, which you can tell from the name is located in the central part of Florida. unlike the University of South Florida, which is also in the central part of Florida. But UCF is a massive school. It's the third largest in the country. Their leadership team is outstanding. They are some of the best of the best, but they don't know why their students were leaving. So they locked themselves in a room with a pizza and a list of each of them. Each vice provost got a list of 20 unregistered students. This was in August 2017, with the instructions to call these 20 students and ask them why they weren't coming back. That empathy moment for the leadership team was amazing. And they found out all the different logistical things that would never have risen to their plate ever. I mean, they're the cabinet. Why are they worried about the number of holds they have? But that's actually what was the pipeline problem for those students. Now you can imagine those inefficiencies going all the way back to kindergarten. And then you got the problem at hand. It's a big one.
Regent Tiedemann.
Thank you, Doctor. I have 3 questions, actually.
Oh, all right.
So with respect to the target demographic that you mentioned at the beginning, the one that keeps you up at night, are the barriers to, and that was the non-traditional students or the former students that had debt.
Some college, no degree.
Some college, no degree, right? Are the barriers to reentry for them is it more dominantly the debt or from their residual or their residual financial disposition, or is it more logistical or circumstantial, having families, evening availability, not just of classes, but advising and career resources?
Very much the latter.
Okay, the latter one. Okay,
Yeah.
yep. I was going to say from my engagements, it's usually some combination of the two, but if it's more the latter, okay. 2, how often are you seeing them resuming their original degree plans from their first attempt at school, or are they starting over? I mean, if they had some level of progress, at least from their first attempt, or are they starting completely over with a new academic program? And then 3, considering that these non-traditional or reentry students might be more locally established with families, spouses, do you have any data regarding their frequency of remaining in state after a successful completion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are locals.
Okay.
For sure. So answering your third question, yes.
Okay.
This is where they live.
Yep.
And they've set up, but it's also not necessarily the adult learner that's got this challenge. It could be, 21-year-old that hit a bump in the road and decided to take a semester off. We call it stop out, and then they never come back.
Right.
Right. Or here, I'll give you a really great one. A friend of mine attended the University of District of Columbia, which is a challenged institution. Got into a paperwork issue with his financial aid. They say he owes $3,000. He doesn't owe $3,000. Nobody can clear this up. He can't come back to school. He's right here, ready to take more classes. But because essentially what's the paperwork error is what's impeding him from getting back to school. That's the logistical challenges. The University of New Mexico has for decades had this recruit back program called the Graduation Project. They provide the recruited back students who they essentially use postcards to mail to them with a simplified re-enrollment application, $750 in grant, and priority registration, and a parking pass. That is enough to get 500 additional students to come back to the University of New Mexico from the Albuquerque community every single year. And they're largely seniors. These are students who have over 100 credits that should be very close to graduating, and they're just not. And it's little things like that. Now, to your question about the degree, it really depends on where you were when you stopped out. For those students I just described, they're often enrolling them in the general studies degree. Whatever you have, doesn't matter. We just want to get you a diploma and get out the door. And the student says, great, that's a great deal for me. And actually, there's plenty of cases where just switching that student to general studies from whatever major they were automatically graduates them. Because it turns out they have all the requirements filled for a degree, but not a degree in forestry or whatever it is that they were doing. Does that get at what you're going for? You've tapped the problem. I mean, it is that sort of stuff, and schools just aren't set up to bring back students for the most part. But they really could be, and it's not hard to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. We've got time for 2 more Regent questions, but just to kind of keep the clock moving, why don't we have our panelists come up, and then Regent Plant, I know you wanted to ask a question, and then Regent Klein. Regent Plant?
Well, yeah, just real quick, I'll switch gears. Can you just talk about data security and how we're able to ensure that we're keeping all the students' information safe?
Yes, I'll say 2 things about that. The first is we use AWS, so that's Amazon Web Services, rock solid. Our internal data security principles, our origin is as a healthcare company. We used to be the advisory board company. We were an adorable little education division within it. I got carved off, and now we retain that data security DNA. FERPA is a very strong data security law. HIPAA puts FERPA to shame. And we ascribe basically to HIPAA. So we're keeping your student data as secure as if it was patient data.
Good question. Regent Klein.
Yes, really interesting presentation. I guess my question to you is this reflected in the graduation rates in your mind? I mean, what's the metric by which we should measure ourselves? I kind of like the Wall Street Journal survey because it says 10 years out, what's your average student making and what did they pay for their education? But it seems to me that, that you have to measure some years out of school to see how students are actually doing. Do you have recommendations in that?
Yeah, 34 years old.
Okay.
About there, somewhere around there is generally what's looked at. Anywhere actually late 20s to early 30s is a good outcome year. The New York Fed, it was interesting you brought up the journal, the New York Fed defines underemployment as is anybody with a college diploma who is working a job in which the majority of people do not have one, meaning that you didn't need it to get that job. And that's about 40% right now. Consistently has been for 27-year-olds, they specifically survey. Your outcome metric depends on who you are, but it needs to be set intentionally. Simply graduating students could be very important from a degree production standpoint, and for there I would look at the number of degrees produced. The quality of the degree or the change it has in someone's life is social mobility. I saw some really interesting data yesterday that I'm looking at for what is the likelihood if a student enters from the lower quintile economically, meaning their parents were in the lower 20% of income, that they end up by age 34 in the top quintile. And if you go to Columbia, it's pretty good, but they don't enroll too many bottom quintile students. Turns out the workhorses are the regional publics. The regional publics get this done. You get enough low-income students in, and you boost them to a complete change in life. And that they do measure based on income.
But how would we, if we were a system, what would you, I mean, we are a system, how should we be measuring as a system? Should we be looking at what the 34-year-olds that we graduate make on average? What should we be looking at? Because I'm not sure if we measure this as well as I mean, I know we look at graduation rates. That I know we look at. But do we actually measure what people are making, 10 years out?
You likely don't because nobody really does. So it's really difficult to look at those kind of data because you're essentially looking at an alumni survey. Tax records are easy to look at, which is why we like to look at income, right? And that information is available, but it's only part of the story. I mean, the income level of a student varies based on their degree that they got and where they live. Students in New York City are going to be making more than students that live in Boise. So this is where the data is a little fraught. But as a system, I would it's just a Russian nested doll. So at the very basic thing, the metric I care most about is today, well, it's a little early, but let's say that it's later in this month, March 31st. How many of your students are registered for the next term? Flat out, just who's registered. It took me 10 years to realize this, but if you're not registered for the next term, you're not coming back. And that's essentially a leading indicator of retention. But it's a really important one, and it applies to all your students. And you can track it minute by minute. Then roll that up to how many of our students are completing in 4 years, not 6. Or for the 2 years, in 2 years, not 3. Not everybody can go full-time, but if you're going full-time, we don't want you to take an extra semester or 2. That's a cost of degree angle. Then I roll it up even further to degree production. What is the University of Wisconsin system's impact on the state of Wisconsin? How many additional diplomas are we tossing out into the state? Which is a huge economic measure for the state. And then you go to the quality of the diploma, which you could measure based on available data, maybe the best way right now, however inadequate it is in terms of salary. So sort of layering it like that would be the way I would approach. It's a different metric for essentially what question you're trying to ask and who you are. For you, I'd be looking at the top 2 that I just mentioned, degree production and the economic mobility associated with that degree. And I really like that economic mobility angle, and happy to share additional resources. There's a website called Opportunity Insights that you should check out. It's a research group. I want to say they're at Harvard. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's Brown, where they're essentially looking at that mobility data and who does the best there. Very, very cool stuff.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett. This has been incredibly great information. Now let's pivot. Chris, could you introduce our panelists this morning?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chris Navia. I'm the Associate Vice President for Student Success here at UW System. And now we're going to pivot the panel to start talking about EAB, as it has been implemented at some of our institutions already, some of the lessons we've learned, the student impacts that we're having, I'm going to give each of the panelists the opportunity to introduce themselves in 1 minute. Your name and your title, please.
Good morning. I'm Karen McClear. I'm Director of Retention and Academic Support at UW-Platteville. I've been in that position for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was a member of the faculty at what was then the University of Wisconsin-Richland, and I also served that campus as Associate Dean.
Good morning. I'm John Coker. I'm Provost at UW-Oshkosh, about 1.5 years in that role, and I'm completing my 28th year at UW-Oshkosh this year.
Morning, I'm Johannes Brits. I'm the Provost in Milwaukee since 2010. Before that, I was the Dean at the School of Information Studies and the Interim Dean at the College of Health Sciences, and I come from South Africa, and I was also at the University of Amsterdam for a while.
Hi, I'm Ed Bennett. You know me.
Okay, so let's get started with the first question, talking about students. Can you all answer the question, which groups of students are experiencing the most benefits from the advent of the EAB Student Success Collaborative that you've been implementing on your campuses?
Go right down the line. Just a little bit of context for UW-Platteville's experience with this tool. The tool went live for us. That's the term that they use when it's ready to be used by the campus late in the fall of 2017. So we had a pilot group of advisors who used the tool in spring of 2018, and then we all the way to the campus this past fall. So we're a little bit new to the program. We have seen benefits for some specific groups of students. Our incoming freshmen, our advisors are working with this tool exclusively for that particular population. We're also spending a lot of time looking at student populations that we define as almost at risk. We had the opportunity through using the historical analytics that Ed talked about earlier to try and find ways in which our student population may have been more likely to struggle or less likely to graduate, and are trying to connect resources to those students before they get into a situation where they might be in academic problems. So those are a couple of populations that we've been focusing on so far.
At UW-Oshkosh, the Student Success Collaborative, as it was called then, was brought to us when Chancellor Leavitt arrived because he was familiar with the success that Georgia State University had being close to his previous institution. And it was essentially the conversation we had on campus is using this product, we'll be able to know when a student's in trouble before they themselves know they're in trouble. And so we started implementation really in the fall of 16 with some pilot groups, and then during the 17-18 academic year and the 18-19 academic year, we've tried to gear this up more. Where we're really probably making the most progress is in our first generation students. I remember many times in the past when I would talk to parents of new students, especially parents who they themselves had not gone on to school, wanting to know what are we going to do if a student is in trouble. And frankly, it was always hard to find out soon enough that a student was in trouble unless they made the first move. And I think with the early alert system and the other success markers that we've implemented, we've been able to deal with many target groups, those who have low GPAs, those who are first generation, students of color. One example I can give you is 2 years ago, our retention rate for students of color actually increased, but then this last year it fell a little bit. And so this past fall, we had 1,393 students of color enrolled for the fall. 24% of them, or 333, received alerts through the Student Success Collaborative, and we were able to contact all of those students and follow up with those students early in the semester to try to get them back on course. Another example I can give you that Ed referred to that was similar on our campus is in the fall of 17, our counseling center followed up with 154 students that had appointments for some reason at the counseling center during the fall semester who were not enrolled for the spring semester when that fall semester completed. After we followed up with those 154 students, 134 of them registered for the spring semester in spring 18, and then 111 of those enrolled this past fall. And so that was the type of active campaigns that we can take using this product.
At UWM, we started the product in 2013, 2014, so I think we were one of the early adopters, and we're also through the changes in the program. I'm glad they changed the guide, which is the app kind of for the students now that we have. Our successes, I think it's for all students, because for the first time you really can use big data and data sciences to integrate and manipulate all your data that you needed to schedule your classes, to set up your appointments, to get your deadlines, to get the early flag from the faculty, et cetera, et cetera. So in that sense, I think it benefits everybody. We generate about 35,000 reports, progress reports per semester by about 500 TAs, faculty, and instructors that are engaged. And of this 35,000, 5,000 of those reports actually are about high-risk students. So we have seen actually an increase in our retention rate since 2014-15. It's an upward projection, actually for all our groups. And I looked at it this morning just to confirm. It's not like going from 60 to 90%, but there's a steady growth of about 68 to 74% now. And we've seen this also in the different groupings of our students. We've made some significant changes in our advising, thanks to President Cross, who gave us a grant to change it. We're not yet at the salary range that you've listed there, yeah, oh, good. Because I said, okay, maybe, that will be very helpful for us. But we introduced meta majors, and, if you look at the using the tool for the pre-nursing program, I was actually, this whole panel brought me again to the attention, I need to do a deep dive into this whole topic, which is very helpful for me too. And what they do with pre-nursing students is just amazing how they've actually looked at students on a 2.5 to a 2.75 GPA. There's an early flag, the faculty member engaged with the student that's in the pre-major, that's now in a meta major for health. So they can interact very early on, proactively with a pre-nursing student to say, you know what, your chemistry is not yet there, maybe you can work hard, and maybe there's an accommodation that you needed. They automatically link with our accessibility resource center in case there's a counselor that they need to meet, which previously wasn't possible. So you integrate that, and then the student can actually reach out. I spoke again this morning with the director of the Accessibility Resource Center. She said, I never had this before. This is just great. When a student comes in, I have everything that I need in terms of the data of a student, their progress report, etc. But I asked the question about privacy. And they said they have a separate system still, that they keep on accessibility and accommodations for students separately. But the communication between a tutor, an advisor, a faculty member, the student, and the Accessibility Resource Center is suddenly there. So you get that support. So on nursing, we could see actually that the number of students that was between the 2.5 and the 2.57 over 6 semesters was about 40 to 50 students. They've narrowed it down now to 9 students. And they can now tell students proactively, first or second year, to say, nursing might not be where you want to end up, based on predictable analytics, but also holistically. We would recommend not take too many extra credits, but redirect yourself to health sciences, public health, or other health-related area. So that's where we actually start seeing the benefits. I think it's too early, really, to say what are the long-term. We're not yet at a cohort of graduation rates yet with EAB and the product, but we are at a point where we can see a definite, and it might not be the only, because we have done a lot of stuff, increase in our retention rates, and we are very excited about that.
So we've been talking a lot about return on investment. It may be a bit premature given how early you are in your adoption of the EAB platform, but can you talk a little bit more about that return on investment? You can define that as you see fit, so it doesn't necessarily have to be financial.
Well, monetary, we did the same with a preemptive attempt to reach out to students who didn't re-enroll. And I just asked for the latest numbers, and I think the previous semester from spring to fall, there was about 120 students that didn't return. We used the EAB app, we identified the students, we contacted not 36 words, but maybe 25 or 50, I don't know. It's even more efficient. And actually 97 students came back of about 120. And that's for us the return on $667,000. Now that's monetary, but I also think about the student. Somebody reach out, it's not just money. It's truly that we can help the student to say, is there anything we can help? The fact that you're linked to financial aid, to the Accessibility Resource Center, to other forms of support that you need, that you might not even know that you don't know that question. So that's where I see the predictable big data in support of us. So that's the monetary value that we have seen. Yeah.
If I could speak to that just a little bit. So I had mentioned earlier our desire to connect with students who might potentially be at risk. And so we, during the 2017-18 academic year, we developed 13 separate proactive outreach campaigns to a variety of targeted student populations. The goal was to connect them with resources, to give them the opportunity to meet with an academic success coach, to make sure that if they had a question, if they had an issue, that we could connect them to the right people. And what we did then is we took a look at those particular students that were involved in those campaigns, those that accepted our offer for help, and looked at their persistence in comparison to those who were offered but perhaps didn't choose to take advantage of it. And we saw gains in persistence. We were able to identify 107 students who continued at the university, who we may have lost if we had not reached out, if we had not connected, if we had not helped them. And that translates for us into about $800,000 in revenue. And that was our first year. So some of it is revenue, but I want to echo what Provost Brent said from Milwaukee about the idea that it's about those students who are sitting out there wondering if anybody cares. And one of the things that my staff tell me most of all is how much students appreciate the outreach. Thank you for contacting me. Thank you for asking me this question. Thank you for answering this question, because they might not have known where to go or where to turn. And so that reaching out proactively has been really effective for us so far.
I don't have any dollar amounts to share, but one of the return on investments is back to the question about the moral imperative. And my years as a faculty member and dean and now provost, I've often said that I want to be part of an institution that's about graduating students and not about admitting students. We need to admit them, of course, but once we have them, we need to graduate them. But there's always been sort of a problem of how we can accomplish that. And I think one of the things we're able to do is have an institutional organization around making sure that we graduate students once we admit them, around retention, persistence, and ultimately graduation. And so it will take time for some institutional culture to shift to use this new product, in the sense that traditional advising treated all students the same. And this allows us to put students into different categories, if you will, around high risk or success, and make sure that we can target groups and give them what they need. And so our return on investment, or our initial success, is around, we've had over 52,000 advising appointments tracked and analyzed, with over 11,000 unique students, over 3,300 unique alerts sent to students to try to encourage them to take action. 90% of our faculty advisors are trained on the product. And so we have seen an increase of both 2% in retention over the last year, and about 4% increase in our graduation rate. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but I think as we move along with this product, we will see many more returns, but those are just a couple of examples.
So let's take another pivot and talk about the lift to implement EAB on your campus and how you get others to use it. Can you speak to the process by which you've been working?
Yeah, I think, from chief academic officer as a provost, if there's no buy-in from a chancellor or a provost, I don't think it will work. And the good thing, my background is in ethics and technology and information, so it was, for me, no-brainer to think data science is big data is the future. It's applicable in every single industry that we're in. So to use that to maximize the outcome of our students was, for me, logic. That was the one thing. The second thing, I had to look at price. I had to understand the cost of what we invest and understand that there's a return. It is also a financial issue, so we had to look at that. But if I didn't take the lead, I think it would be much more difficult to implement it on campus. So I then reached out, I wrote email personally to the campus. I got, I assigned it to my assistant provost, who really is data-driven, to really, Giselle Durham, to really introduce and implement it on campus. So she was my direct designee to work on this. We introduced a SWAT team, where we got a senior advisor in every school and college to to meet monthly to really understand and implement and do the training. Because if you don't get the advisors on board, it won't work. And then the key thing is to get the faculty, the instructors, and the TAs to use it, specifically for early warning. So we did some training. I worked with the deans to make sure that actually the faculty use this, because the success actually is with faculty, because they generate it. They send out the early warning, and then it goes to the advisor or the tutor and the students in that interaction. So this is how we implement that through training, through leadership from the top, and then to share your successes, but also to learn where there are areas that, you know, we still have lift to do. But I think that's how we on our campus started.
We've certainly had some struggles as we've implemented. We've had a number of changes in the leadership teams in the 2.5 to 3 years that we've been working on this, but I think we have a good team in place. Faculty buy-in is very important. I think through our new budgeting process and financial transparency at the university, faculty and staff understand that healthy enrollment turns right into healthy revenue, and we'll be able to support the work of faculty and staff and students if we can keep a solid enrollment base. But we also have a little bit of issues around the data, you know, that whether it's giving us the right and accurate results, especially around the high, medium, and low risk factors. But we're working through those issues. We have started a big campaign this this semester, this spring, to try to get more institutional buy-in. We have more than a dozen training sessions scheduled upcoming. Last year, faculty submitted early alerts or early warnings in classes in 54% of our 100 level classes. And so we're trying to increase that. We won't stop until we get 100% involvement in early warning. So there has been a little bit of a lift both for buy-in and just the technical part, but I think our early success shows the reason to keep moving forward on this.
Thank you, panelists. I think I did have one Regent question. Regent Gruby, did you have a question?
I have a very quick question, although I may have heard the answer to it a moment ago. And I wanted to briefly revisit my question about attitude at the institutions and how we can, and you can all promote a new attitude towards advising to be embraced. You've all described some remarkable and measurable programmatic successes. They sound to me like they also reflect an embrace of this new attitude and new approach toward advising. And I'd revisit my question for the three of you. Why are you seeing an embrace of that new approach at your institutions? And what can the rest of the system learn from that? And I think the answer I may have heard is that it's really from personal leadership from chancellors and each of the three of you. But I'd be curious in your thoughts on that.
I think from our perspective, Chancellor Moni was very clear. We got a charge from him to look at what we call the outstanding learning environment. And we work with every school and college on setting 3, 6, and 10-year goals based on 24 different criteria, from recruitment to they enroll, to the retention, to graduation, to post-graduation. We want experiential learning for every single student directly from the chancellor. So I think that, as I mentioned, your top management, your top leadership, when you have that buy-in, and that circles down to me, to the deans, that's the moral imperative, but also that's the imperative for us to make sure that it works. And that's why we make radical changes, actually, to our advising. Multicultural-centered advising, holistic advising, and then the meta majors that we've introduced is supportive of data sciences. It's not data sciences, it's how you build your structure in support of using big data to support the structure.
Our approach, as we were beginning to implement the tool, we actually embarked on a self-study at our campus about academic advising, our processes, and really helped define as a campus what our goals were going to be. That's been very helpful in changing that conversation. We increased our professional advising staff, and those staff members have been really integral in then going back and communicating with academic departments and faculty advisors about the work that we do and that the impact that it has. But it is a process where it involves a lot of conversation and really thoughtful conversation about what's in the best interest of the student.
The only thing I'll add is student success was a huge part of our recent new strategic plan. Now it sounds obvious that's what you want to accomplish at an institute of higher education, but to publish that, to talk about that, to make sure that we all know on our campus, that's one of our 4 major priorities as we move forward is student success. And then how do we put that into action?
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got time for 2 more Regent questions, and then I'll wrap up by President Cross. Regent Mueller.
Thank you, and thank you very much to all of you. Driving in this morning, I heard a radio segment about students here at UW-Madison petitioning for additional mental health counselors. And I wonder what advice you can give to us as Regents as we balance the need for mental health and sort of general health counselors with this academic advising focus that we've spent this hour or so discussing. Thank you.
I'm certainly not surprised that you heard that on the radio. I think it's very true that that is a concern that we are seeing across all institutions. If a student isn't whole, isn't well, whether it's physical, whether it's mental, whether it's food insecurity, whatever it is, they are not going to be able to perform their best academically. And so I think it's really important that as we continue supporting the students, that we think about all of their needs in tandem. For a student to work with an academic advisor effectively, they need to have these other needs met. And so we are seeing that as a very important concern. When we look at the entire student population and we figure out how many of them could be successful if they just had some of these support services, I think that's an imperative that we feel very strongly about.
Again, I think that what we're trying to put in place on our campus is student success is an institutional-wide responsibility. And we can't just have pockets and say, you take care of this part, and you take care of that part, and you take care of that part. So I think the mental health of our students is just as important or more important than their intellectual health and experience. And so if we can, again, identify students and get them into the proper programs or assistance that they need, then we're working towards that success as an institution.
And I think lastly, just this tool helps a lot to coordinate, or it's a support system where you really integrate the different support structures on campus with one another. And also, we are actually now looking at mental health support for online students that might live out in California and take a course here. If they have problems, how do we reach out to students who doesn't live with you on campus? So we now have a task force to really look at reaching out and actually accommodating and trying to address that part of our student body.
Thank you, panelists. Regent Atwell.
Thank you. Most illuminating presentation. I appreciate it. Actually, I just want to offer something I've been thinking as I've been listening to all of this, which is the role of parents. I realize that our students overwhelmingly have attained the age of majority. It took me till fairly late in life as a parent to realize that my responsibilities as a parent didn't truncate at the age of 18. And this is more of an attitudinal thing. I think the data is pretty clear that student success at an elementary and a secondary level is very heavily dependent on parental engagement. And we don't have the ability as a university to compel parental engagement, but I'm wondering what we could do to encourage it more among the students and the parents themselves, because I've been to some freshman orientations where it seemed the main point of the orientation was, I am not to do anything to interfere in the university's relationship with my child. Or you don't have to respond. I just think I think parental engagement is really important.
I will tell you that we have parents who are very engaged in their students.
Sometimes over-engaged, right?
But You're correct. Parents are wonderful allies, and parents want to be informed. They want to know what's going on at the university. We regularly communicate with parents through electronic newsletters because they like to know things like when are midterms and those sorts of things. So we see them as allies and work to help them say to the students what we want to say, which is, are you asking for help? Are you getting the resources you need? Are you going to class? If they hear it from their parents as well, it's just a benefit.
So I want to jump in on that one because this is an avenue of some really interesting exploration that's going on right now. What you experienced of the sort of stay out of the way parent is the exact opposite of what it should be. And we see some great progress where during orientation, especially for parents of first generation students, but the parents are put through a boot camp. I mean, it's not anything, it's an afternoon, but it's essentially like, we need to explain to you what college is because you didn't experience this yourself and you desperately want to know because your child's about to go do this. Let's define all the same terms we're defining for them. This is what a residence hall is. This is what a provost is. Probably don't need to do that one, but you see where I'm going with this. Here's your responsibilities to help us along the way. The parents love this stuff. I mean, it's really helping them out because they never learned it. In certain areas of the country, another big innovation here is offering it in Spanish. So having, for ESL families, I mean, if you've got a parent who, your student's ready to go, but the parent needs to be engaged in their own level, this is coming out of the Southwest, Texas, places like this, and it's also a really big innovation. Not sure exactly what the impact would be on Wisconsin, but that's the other area. The move is to engage the parents more, recognizing that increasingly so many of them have no experience with you whatsoever and have no idea how to navigate this campus and can't help you help the student.
Before we excuse our panelists, President Cross, I think you had to wrap up, but maybe we'll make that quick.
I took a drink of water at the wrong time. I know our time is almost up. In fact, we're over. Several chancellors, I'm sure, would like to speak about this. But this is really important. As you can see, we put it in our strategic plan in a broader sense. Changing our culture so that we are sensitive to this and we truly care about our students is not only a moral imperative, it's an economic one for us, as all of you can see. There are two things that I think I want to pull out of this. First, thanks, Ed. Thanks for coming, and Ben for putting this together, and to our panelists for sharing this. Our culture has to change, but we have to do so in an informed fashion. And part of these tools is to help us see our flaws, holding up a mirror to how we operate and how we should operate. And that's one of the advantages of this tool. But make no mistake, it's a tool. It's got to be used. The big cost in this, and Ed had one slide, is the people that are required to wrap around this and use it effectively. And that's the piece that we're all trying to figure out how to do that well. And I didn't talk about it, but the quality of that advising conversation, not just the expression of interest in the student, but how that's transmitted in a meaningful way, simple, direct. Those are areas where we have to improve as well. Regent Greavy kept talking about the attitude. Hopefully that is part of what we see as we become aware of our own attitude and how to improve that. And hopefully this tool will help us see that. And as we look at these metrics, retention and graduation rates, we're also exploring a partnership with DWD. So at least 5 years out, we can look at earnings as well and impact on that. It's not as healthy right after they graduate as it is further down the line, and I think you said 34 years old. I appreciate all this, and I appreciate you folks doing this. This is incredibly important to us in the future. And by 2028, when the crisis really hammers us, based on the behavior of the recession folks that should have been behaving differently, we'd all be better off. Right? But that was a joke. So this is not just something we're going to have to work with in the next year or two. This is going to be ongoing for a long time. So thanks, everybody. I'm sorry.
Let's give our panelists a round of applause. We'll go ahead and take a break for lunch, and we'll reconvene back here at 1 o'clock. Thank you, Regents.